Welcome to Sanctum Nexus, where freedom is just a marketing slogan and the air smells like recycled despair. In the grand scheme of the universe, it's just another floating tin can, spinning around a dead rock in Sector Who Cares. The place is a masterpiece of cosmic irony, an orbital megaprison meant to uphold justice, or at least the version of it that keeps alien gods happy and human necks snugly in their nooses. The corridors were a charming design choice, all metallic chill and flickering lights, making every walk feel like a roll of the dice in a horror holo. Not that the residents got much time to stroll. Most were too busy trying to avoid getting shanked over yesterday's nutrient paste. Warden Thalix loved his job like a hangman loves a neck. He was a large man with a permascowl that could sigh or milk at 20 paces, and a voice that didn't so much command attention as it did demand an exorcism. Today, he stood glaring down at his newest batch of inmates, a ragtag group of humans with expressions ranging from defiant to screw you and your entire alien pantheon. "Welcome to Sanctum Nexus," Thalix announced, his voice echoing off the walls like the universe's worst PA system, where the only thing lower than our oxygen levels is your chance of escape. A ripple of sarcastic applause followed. It wasn't like the prisoners had much else to do with their hands. Among them was Ree, a former engineer who could build a warp drive out of duct tape and a dream. She had the kind of face that had seen too much and eyes that suggested she'd rather be anywhere else, even if anywhere else was a black hole. Ree raised an eyebrow, her voice dripping with mock enthusiasm. "Do we get complimentary shackles, or is that extra?" Thalix ignored her, his face an expert study in not giving a damn. "I don't care what you did to get here, but I do care who you pray to now." "Let me guess," Ree drawled. "The alien gods demand our unwavering devotion and maybe a fruit basket every Thursday." Thalix's grin was a shark's, brief and purpose-led. "You catch on quick. Consider your survival dependent on how well you grovel." The truth, as inconvenient as a politician at a brothel, was that the alien gods had an ego problem. The kind that made dictators look humble. They wanted worship, endless and unconditional, from the humans they'd graciously spared. Human defiance, they figured, was like a bad rash, irritating and best dealt with swiftly. "They call themselves gods, but I've seen gods with better table manners," Ree muttered under her breath, nudging the prisoner next to her. He was a wiry man with too many tattoos and not enough teeth. "Name's Argos," he offered, his voice a mix of gravel and bad decisions. "I'm here for questioning authority." "You?" "Ree." "Here for the ambience," she replied, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. Their whispered exchange was interrupted by the sudden, blaring arrival of the prison's alarm system. The sound was less alert and more regret distilled into a siren. "Someone tripped the security," Thalix snapped, his eyes narrowing like he could shoot lasers from them. "Stay put unless you want to test the vacuum outside." The prisoners shuffled uneasily, but Ree's mind was already racing, gears turning faster than a politician's promise. "I've got a bad feeling about this," she said to Argos, half smiling, and not in the fun way. In the control room, Thalix barked orders like a conductor directing a symphony of chaos. The screens flickered with static, the cameras revealing little more than shadows and the occasional streak of movement. "Find the problem and fix it," he growled at his underlings, each one more nervous than the last. Meanwhile, in the bowels of the prison, something was brewing. A plan was hatching, the kind that had hairline cracks in its logic and enough desperation to fuel 1,000 sacrifices. And it all started with an engineer and a troublemaker who had nothing left to lose. "You think we could, I dunno, make a break for it?" Argos asked, his eyes glinting with the kind of reckless hope that usually preceded a hospital stay. Ree considered it for a moment, tapping her chin thoughtfully. "Well, I've always wanted to see if I could outrun a laser," she said, her voice light despite the grim prospect. "But first, let's see what this ruckus is about." The two of them moved through the corridors, their footsteps echoing in the silence like ghosts on a mission. Around them, the prison hummed with the restless energy of the damned, each cell a reminder of what happened to those who dared defy the gods. Eventually, they reached the source of the commotion, a locked door behind which the alarms blared with a fervor that suggested they had a personal vendetta. Argos knelt by the control panel, his fingers flying over the buttons with a skill that spoke of too many hours spent breaking and entering. "I can get us in," he muttered, more to himself than Ree. "Good," Ree replied, her eyes scanning the corridor for signs of approaching guards. "Because if this is another false alarm, I'm going to need a new hobby." With a beep and a whir, the door slid open to reveal a room filled with blinking consoles, and a single, solitary figure hunched over a terminal. The figure turned, revealing a face that seemed to have misplaced its sense of humor somewhere in the last decade. "Who the hell are you?" he demanded, his voice tinged with the kind of exasperation usually reserved for small children and persistent telemarketers. "Your salvation," Ree quipped, stepping inside with a confidence that suggested she hadn't just wandered into an alien honcho's office, "or your worst nightmare if you're into that sort of thing." Argos followed, offering a mock salute. "We're here to fix whatever's broken. Or at least break it in new and interesting ways." The man, technician or lackey, it was hard to tell, looked at them as if deciding which form of insanity they represented. "The system's gone haywire," he admitted grudgingly, gesturing to the monitors that showed an endless stream of error messages. "Something triggered a lockdown, and now it's all gone to hell. Guess it's a good thing we brought marshmallows," Argos said, flashing a grin that was more teeth than warmth. Ree, meanwhile, was already studying the console, her fingers ghosting over the keys with the familiarity of an old lover. "Mind if I take a look?" she asked, flashing a smile that was all business. The technician hesitated, but desperation won out over common sense. "Sure, knock yourself out. But if you make it worse, I'm blaming you." "Story of my life," Ree replied lightly, diving into the system with all the enthusiasm of a gambler on a winning streak. As she worked, the air in the room seemed to thicken with tension. Each beep of the console was a heartbeat, each flicker of the screen a promise of either salvation or damnation. Argos leaned against the wall, watching with a casual interest that belied the rising pressure. "You know, if this doesn't pan out, we could always try the old fake our deaths and escape in the chaos routine," he suggested, his tone half joking and half serious. Ree snorted, not taking her eyes off the screen. "And miss out on all this quality time with our benevolent overlords," perished the thought. The technician, meanwhile, was biting his nails down to the quick, his eyes flicking nervously between Ree and the console. "You sure you know what you're doing?" he asked, his voice tinged with doubt. "As sure as I am that the gods have egos the size of their home planet," Ree replied dryly. "Sit tight. I'm almost done." With a final flourish, she hit the enter key and the room fell silent, the alarm silencing as if someone had flipped a cosmic switch. "There," she said, stepping back from the console with a satisfied smile. "Systems back online and no need to thank us all at once." The technician exhaled, the relief palpable. "You did it," he said, almost disbelieving. "I can't believe you actually did it." Ree shrugged, her smile turning wry. "What can I say? I have a knack for fixing things, especially when breaking them would be more fun." Argos clapped her on the shoulder, his grin infectious. "Remind me to never underestimate the power of human ingenuity or recklessness." As they turned to leave, the technician called after them. "Wait, what about the gods? They'll want to know what happened." Ree paused, considering his words. "Let them know we've got it under control," she said finally, her voice confident. "And if they don't like it, well, they know where to find us." With that, she and Argos made their way back into the labyrinthine corridors, leaving behind the chaos they'd temporarily tamed. Behind them, the technician stared after them, a mix of admiration and bewilderment on his face. In the shadowy heart of Sanctum Nexus, the air was thick with secrets and defiance, whispering promises of freedom and the audacity to dream of it. And as they walked, Ree couldn't help but chuckle to herself. the sound echoing softly in the metal halls. "Here's to our benevolent gods," she murmured, more to herself than to anyone else. "May they choke on their own arrogance." The universe, she decided, needed a little more rebellion, and who better to deliver it than a bunch of stubborn humans with nothing left to lose? The Sanctum Nexus, otherwise known as the prison where hope goes to die, was having a rather uneventful Tuesday. That is until the gods decided it needed a little more excitement. Nothing too fancy, just the imminent threat of divine intervention. Thalix was in the midst of his routine grumbling, something about the coffee tasting like liquid despair, when the call came through. "There's an emissary coming," the voice crackled through the intercom, managing to sound both bored and terrified. "Name's Zephyrin." Thalix sighed and pinched the bridge of his nose. "Fantastic," he muttered to himself, "because what we really need is another two-bit deity strutting around like they own the place." Meanwhile, Ree was busy not embarking on a suicide mission. Yet, she was back in her cell, pretending to be interested in her dinner, a grayish lump that could only be described as nutritionally dubious. Argos was seated across from her, using a plastic spoon to shovel what was either mashed potatoes or industrial waste into his mouth. "Ever get the feeling that we're nothing but cosmic entertainment?" Argos asked, his voice muffled by the mush. Ree smirked. "Only every damn day, but don't worry, I'm working on a plan." She leaned in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "How do you feel about sticking it to the gods?" Argos paused, spoon midair, before letting out a laugh that made a few heads turn their way. "Thought you'd never ask." She glanced around to make sure no one was eavesdropping before continuing. "There's subspace tech in the basement of this floating hellhole. Old stuff, but if I can get it running, it might just give those gods a run for their money." Argos raised an eyebrow, his grin widening. "I like the sound of might. Sounds like we've got a snowball's chance in hell." "Exactly," Ree said, her eyes gleaming with mischief. "Which is about the same odds we have of surviving another meal here." Their little chat was cut short by the sudden arrival of the prison's PA system, crackling to life with all the grace of a dying cat. "Attention, inmates," Thalix's voice boomed, managing to sound both authoritative and utterly bored. "The gods have deemed us worthy of a visit from their emissary. All should prepare to grovel accordingly." Argos rolled his eyes. "Just what I needed, more celestial condescension," Ree chuckled. "Think of it as an opportunity to practice your lip service." The Sanctum Nexus was a marvel of modern architecture. If by marvel you meant a place with all the charm of a medieval dungeon, minus the torches. The corridors were sterile, the metal floors polished to a mirror finish, perfect for reflecting the weary, defeated faces of its inhabitants. And then there was Zephyrin. The emissary's arrival was heralded by a fanfare of lights and robotic heralds that would make even a reality TV star blush. Zephyrin was tall, draped in robes that shimmered with an otherworldly glow, and wore a crown that seemed to be compensating for something. They floated, not walked, down the corridor, exuding an aura of superiority that could suffocate a black hole. Thalix greeted Zephyrin with a nod, a forced smile plastered on his face. "Welcome to Sanctum Nexus, emissary. How may we serve your divine whims today?" Zephyrin's voice was a melodious lilt, a sound engineered to instill awe and obedience. "The gods are displeased. There are whispers of dissent among the humans. This cannot stand." Thalix's smile tightened. "Dissent? Surely not here. We run a tight ship." "Well, more like a sinking one, but you get the idea." The emissary's eyes narrowed, a gesture that somehow conveyed both annoyance and divine patience. "The gods are not amused by your levity. They require absolute devotion, not sarcasm wrapped in incompetence." Thalix nodded, his expression a masterclass in feigned sincerity. "Understood. We'll tighten the screws, so to speak." Meanwhile, Ree had managed to scrounge together a makeshift toolkit, the kind of kit that screamed, "I'm not a threat unless you're a loose screw." Argos shadowed her as they slipped into the underbelly of the prison, where the air was stale with neglect and the hum of forgotten machinery. "So, this subspace tech," Argos began, trying to keep his voice low. "Do you really think it can do what you say?" Ree shrugged, her eyes scanning the endless tangle of wires and rusting consoles. "Best case, we cause a cosmic hiccup that the gods won't expect. Worst case, we blow ourselves to pieces. Either way sounds better than our current gig." Argos nodded, his grin turning into a chuckle. "I always wanted to go out with a bang." They reached their destination, a large metal door with a control panel that looked like it had seen better millennia. Ree knelt down, prying open the panel with a satisfying crack. It was a mess of wires and circuits, each one more frayed than the last. "Think you can work your magic?" Argos asked, peering over her shoulder. Ree smirked, pulling out a small device from her pocket, a relic of her past life as an engineer. "This ain't magic, it's science, and maybe a little bit of luck." As she worked, Argos kept watch, eyes scanning the dimly lit corridor for any signs of trouble. The air was thick with tension, the kind that promised either impending doom or unexpected success. After what felt like an eternity, Ree finally stepped back, wiping her hands on her jumpsuit. "All right, it's rigged. Now all we have to do is wait for the right moment." Argos grinned, a wolfish glint in his eyes. "Can't wait to see the look on those gods' faces." Back in the main hall, Zephyrin was delivering a sermon that was part threat, part promise. "The gods demand your loyalty," they intoned, their voice echoing through the chamber. "And in return, you shall know their favor." Ree and Argos slipped in just in time to catch the tail end of the speech, blending in with the crowd of prisoners who wore expressions ranging from bored to vaguely irritated. "Favor my ass," Ree muttered under her breath, earning a stifled laugh from Argos. Zephyrin's gaze swept over the crowd, settling on Ree for a brief, chilling moment. It was enough to make her skin crawl, but she held her ground, meeting the emissary's gaze with defiant eyes. "The gods are always watching," Zephyrin continued, oblivious to the undercurrent of rebellion simmering below the surface. "And they do not forgive transgressions lightly." With that, the emissary concluded their visit, leaving behind an air of unease that clung to the prisoners like a second skin. Thalix, ever the dutiful watchdog, began ushering the inmates back to their cells, barking orders like a shepherd with a particularly unruly flock. Ree and Argos exchanged a glance, a silent understanding passing between them. This was it. The moment they'd been waiting for. As the prisoners shuffled back, Ree lingered near the back of the group, her fingers itching to set her plan into motion. She glanced over at Argos, who gave her a subtle nod. "Now or never," she whispered to herself, taking a deep breath and preparing to unleash chaos. With a deft flick of her wrist, she activated the device she'd rigged earlier, the console in the bowels of the prison springing to life with a hum that could only be described as ominous. The effect was immediate. The lights flickered, and an alarm blared to life, a different one this time, signaling not just a malfunction but an outright rebellion. Prisoners froze, confusion giving way to panic as the hall descended into chaos. Thalix's voice boomed over the PA system, struggling to restore order but failing miserably. Ree grinned, feeling a surge of adrenaline as she watched the scene unfold. It was working. She was actually pulling it off. "Time to make our exit," Argos shouted over the din, grabbing Ree's arm as they started weaving through the throng of panicked inmates. As they ran, Ree couldn't help but cast one last glance over her shoulder, silently daring the gods to come down and stop them. But the gods, it seemed, had other plans. Or perhaps they were just as powerless as everyone else in the face of a little human ingenuity. They made it to the outer corridors, where the air was cooler and the chaos a distant roar. Ree's heart pounded in her chest, each beat a reminder that they were still alive, still kicking against the pricks. "Where to now?" Argos asked, his voice breathless but full of exhilaration. Ree paused, considering their options. "We head for the dock. If we can get a ship, we might just slip through the cracks." Argos nodded, his grin widening. "Then what are we waiting for?" As they sprinted towards potential freedom, Ree couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the cusp of something monumental. A shift in the balance of power, a chance to show those self-proclaimed gods that humans weren't just pawns to be moved at their whim. The universe was vast and uncaring, but that didn't mean they had to roll over and take it, not when there was still fight left in them. With each step, they left behind the shadows and chains of Sanctum Nexus, driven by the hope of a future that was theirs to shape. And maybe, just maybe, the gods were watching. But if they were, Ree hoped they were taking notes, because this was one hell of a show. Ree didn't consider herself a connoisseur of bad ideas, but she had enough experience to recognize a truly spectacular one brewing. Teaming up with Jax, Sanctum Nexus's resident cryptologist and a man who looked like he hadn't seen sunlight or sanity in years, was definitely in that category. His cell was a mess of papers, wires, and what looked like the remains of several unfortunate electronic devices. Ree, Jax said, his voice a nasal whine that cut through the air like a rusty blade. What brings you to my humble abode? Come to admire my collection of obsolete tech. If by admire, you mean used to blow a hole in this place, then sure, she replied, stepping over a pile of tangled cables. I need someone who can decode the prison's defense systems. Think you can manage that between conspiracy theories? Jax grinned, revealing teeth that bore the same relationship to hygiene that the prison did to freedom. Ah, subspace tech, eh? Interesting stuff. Old, unpredictable, probably designed by someone with a death wish. My kind of challenge. While Jax busied himself deciphering the mess of code with fingers that moved like spiders on speed, Ree watched with a mix of fascination and concern. This was the man who held the key to their escape, or their imminent demise. You know, Jax said, not looking up from his work, they say the gods built this place to break the human spirit, but if you ask me, they just outsourced it to the lowest bidder. Figures, Ree replied, leaning against the doorway. Why do the dirty work when you can just sit back and let bureaucracy do it for you? Meanwhile, in the grand theater of celestial overreach, Zephyrin was losing their patience. The emissary floated through the halls with the grace of a swan and the temperament of a hornet. Their presence was meant to inspire awe, but the gods' version of divine intervention was like handing out parking tickets during an apocalypse. The gods demand unity, Zephyrin declared to a group of prisoners who'd gathered out of equal parts obligation and morbid curiosity. Resistance is futile. Didn't some ancient show already use that line? A voice piped up from the back, earning a ripple of laughter that was quickly stifled by Thalix's glare. Zephyrin's smile was as thin as the air supply. The gods are not amused by your insolence, they intoned, clearly struggling to maintain their composure. Unity will be enforced. Back in Jax's den of lunacy, the cryptologist finally looked up from his work, dark circles under his eyes making him look like a raccoon who'd seen too much. I think I've got it. The defense systems are a real Frankenstein's monster of coding, but I've managed to cobble together a workaround. Ree raised an eyebrow, hopeful despite herself. Are you saying you can shut them down? I can confuse them at least, Jax said with a shrug. Make them think a solar flare's coming or some cosmic nonsense like that, enough to maybe give us a window. Good, she nodded, feeling a thrill of anticipation. Soon as we get a chance, we hit them hard. Jax gave a mock salute. Anything to stick it to the cosmic overlords, right? As Ree turned to leave, she paused. Jax, if this works, thanks. He waved her off with a dismissive hand. Don't thank me yet. If we're lucky, they'll just vaporize us quickly. With the plan set in motion, Ree returned to Argos, who was busy spreading the word among the other inmates. The mood in the cell block was shifting like the air before a storm. There was an undercurrent of resolve, even among the most beaten-down prisoners. How's our little rebellion shaping up? Argos asked as soon as she appeared. Any chance we're not all going to die horribly? Jax thinks he can scramble the defenses, Ree replied, her voice low but charged with energy. We just need to coordinate, time it right. Get everyone ready to move when the systems go down. Argos smirked. Love it when a plan comes together, even if it's held together with duct tape and wishful thinking. The prisoners began a quiet, careful coordination. It was the kind of teamwork you only saw in desperate people, the kind who knew the odds were against them but figured they didn't have much to lose. Zephyrin, meanwhile, was having less success with their own efforts. The emissaries' attempts to instill fear and obedience were met with a growing murmur of defiance that could not be silenced by divine decree alone. Thalix, ever the opportunist, sidled up to Zephyrin with a wary expression. "Seems like your divine mandate isn't resonating quite as you'd hoped." The emissary's eyes narrowed dangerously. "The humans need reminding of their place." "Perhaps more drastic measures are required." Thalix nodded, a hint of a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Might want to hurry that up. An inspired bunch of prisoners is harder to keep in line than a bored one." Back in the cells, Ree and Argos were busy preparing the inmates for what came next. Each face she passed was a mix of fear and determination, and for the first time Ree felt a flicker of something akin to hope. It was a fragile thing but potent in its rarity. "All right," she said, addressing the gathered group. "This is our chance. And yeah, it's a long shot, but so is everything in this place. If we pull this off, the gods will have to find some other sorry bastards to torment." Jax's voice piped up from the back. "Just remember, if we fail, at least we'll have the satisfaction of annoying the hell out of them." Argos chuckled. "And really, isn't that what life's all about?" With grim determination, the prisoners prepared for their bid for freedom. It was a chaotic dance, a flurry of whispered instructions, last-minute checks, and an undercurrent of adrenaline that made the air buzz. And then, like a signal from the cosmos itself, the lights flickered, a harbinger of the chaos to come. It was time. Jax, stationed at a makeshift console, gave Rhea a nod. "Everything's set. Just waiting for your go." "Then let's give them a show," Rhea said, her voice steady but charged with a wild energy. She moved through the ranks, urging everyone into position as Jax worked his magic. The defense systems, ancient and finicky as they were, sputtered and whirred, caught in the throes of Jax's interference. An alarm blared, shrieking through the corridors with the urgency of impending doom. Zephyrin, caught off guard, attempted to reassert control. "The gods demand order," they shouted, but their words fell on deaf ears. The crowd was already in motion, like a tidal wave of desperate humanity. Rhea and Argos led the charge, the path to freedom cleared by a chaos that was both terrifying and exhilarating. As they sprinted toward the docks, Rhea caught a glimpse of Thalix, his expression unreadable as he watched the spectacle unfold. "Think he'll try to stop us?" Argos asked, breathless but grinning from ear to ear. "Thalix is many things," Rhea replied, dodging a fallen pipe with feline grace, "but a fool isn't one of them." As they neared the dock, the air buzzed with the charge of potential escape. The prisoners surged forward, fueled by a collective yearning for freedom that had lain dormant for too long. The ships, relics of a bygone era, were docked in a row, their hulks looming like specters in the dim light. It was a marvel they'd even stayed in one piece, let alone operational. "Pick one and hope it starts," Rhea shouted, eyeing the battered vessels with a mix of skepticism and hope. Argos pointed toward a mid-sized freighter with a hull that seemed less battered than the rest. "That one looks almost promising," he said with more optimism than he felt. They clambered aboard, Rhea quickly taking the controls while Argos busied himself with the unfamiliar systems. The ship groaned to life, coughing out a plume of smoke like an asthmatic dragon. "All aboard the HMS Dysfunction," Rhea muttered, her hands moving over the controls with the skill of someone who'd had to wing it more times than she'd care to admit. "Next stop, anywhere but here." Jax's voice crackled over the comms, a final salute from a fellow conspirator. "See you on the other side, Rhea. Give him hell." With a final glance back at the prison that had been their world of despair, Rhea powered up the engines. The ship lurched forward, a lumbering titan of outdated tech and defiance. As they broke free of Sanctum Nexus's gravitational pull, a surge of triumph surged through the vessel. The prisoners whooped and hollered, their voices a ragged chorus of victory. The universe stretched out before them, vast and indifferent, a reminder of the odds they still faced. But for now, they were free. "Any idea where we're headed?" Argos asked, settling into a seat beside her as the stars streaked past. "Anywhere," Ree replied, a hint of a smile playing on her lips. "Anywhere but here. And maybe the gods were watching, but right now, Ree couldn't care less. They'd done the impossible, and for once, the universe felt like a place of limitless possibility rather than inevitable despair." With a deep breath and a steady hand, she steered them into the unknown, the ship a testament to the indomitable human spirit, even in the face of cosmic odds. There was a particular brand of stupid that only came with desperation, and Ree had witnessed its full bloom in the last gasps of their escape. But now, as the stars stretched into nothingness around them, she realized that their brand of stupid had somehow worked. Freedom was a heady thing, even if it tasted a bit like burnt circuits and impending disaster. But celebrations were short-lived when the universe was still out to get you. Ree found herself back in a huddle with Jax and Argos, trying to figure out their next move. The ship, aptly named HMS Dysfunction, was about as reliable as a politician's promise, and the makeshift crew was more suited to causing chaos than piloting through it. "Right, so we've got about as much fuel as a candle in a hurricane," Ree said, eyeing the blinking console that seemed to be in a constant state of existential crisis. "Not to mention this bucket's older than my Nan's taste in music." Argos nodded sagely, like a man who'd just discovered the meaning of life and found it lacking. "And in case we forgot, the gods are still out there, probably scratching their heads and planning a smiting session." "Good times," Jax muttered, tinkering with an exposed panel that looked like it might explode out of sheer spite. "But I think I've found something interesting buried in the system. The kind of interesting that makes you wonder if the universe secretly loves irony." Ree raised an eyebrow. "Do tell, or are you just trying to keep us in suspense?" Jax grinned, a feral, unhinged expression. "Seems our dear gods built this prison on a house of cards. The subspace tech, it's got a flaw, a big one. We could turn the whole damn place into a weapon if we wanted." "You mean blow it up?" Argos asked, his eyes lighting up at the thought. "Because I'm all for a fireworks display." "Not quite," Jax replied, his tone dripping with the kind of madness that came from too much hope mixed with too little sleep. "More like disrupt everything around it. Cause enough chaos to give us a real shot at slipping by unnoticed." Ree let out a low whistle. "Let me guess, there's a catch," Jax snorted. "Of course there's a catch. This is us. If we pull the trigger, we risk drawing every celestial eye in the galaxy. Plus, it could fry us like bacon if not done right." "So, business as usual," Argos concluded with a shrug that was both casual and fatalistic. While Jax fiddled with the ship's innards, Ree gathered the rest of the inmates. They'd been a ragtag group at best, but now they were something more, something that might just be dangerous if pointed in the right direction. "Listen up," she barked, her voice cutting through the murmurs like a knife through butter. "We've got a shot at making this escape count. Jax has found a way to use the prison's own tech against it." The crowd shifted, interest peaked, though skepticism remained thick. Distrust was as natural as breathing in a place like Sanctum Nexus, where hope was sold as cheaply as they sold out each other. "And why should we trust you?" A voice challenged from the back, followed by nods from those around. "Because we've got nothing left to lose," Ree shot back. "And because if you don't, the gods will find us eventually and make examples of every one of us. Nothing like a bit of divine retribution to keep you motivated," Argos added, ever the cynic. The group murmured amongst themselves, side glances and whispered doubts bouncing back and forth like a ball no one wanted to catch. In the end, desperation won, as it always does. "What exactly is the plan?" someone else asked, arms crossed and skepticism still firmly in place. Jack stepped forward, a wild look in his eyes that was part genius and part maniac. "We set off a chain reaction in the subspace systems. It'll screw up their communications, their defenses, everything. Gives us a small window to disappear into the void." Sounds like a plan, another inmate muttered, a suicidal one. Hey, Jax grinned. What's life without a little suicide mission? As the murmurs of agreement mixed with resigned acceptance, Ree felt a sliver of something almost like pride. They were a crew now, dysfunctional, cynical, but a crew nonetheless. Back at the helm, Ree and Argos were poring over star maps, the kind that looked like they'd been drawn by a toddler with a crayon and a shaky hand. We need a safe place to land after we pull this off, she mused, tracing a finger over potential hiding spots. Safe is a relative term, Argos quipped. I'd settle for not instantly lethal. Jax reappeared, looking like a man who'd just finished assembling a bomb. Everything set, as ready as it'll ever be. Good, Ree said, her voice tight but resolute. Let's give these gods something to talk about. With a deep breath and a final check, Jax initiated the process. The ship shuddered, the hum of its systems rising to a fever pitch that made everyone brace for the worst. This is your captain speaking, Argos announced, voice dripping with mock cheerfulness. Please make sure your seatbelts are securely fastened, and in the event of an emergency, well, good luck. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife, each second stretching into eternity as the ship's systems began their symphony of chaos. Outside, the stars held their breath, waiting for the inevitable storm. And then it happened. A ripple of energy cascaded outwards, a tidal wave of disruption that sent shockwaves through the void. Lights flickered, alarms blared, and for a heart-stopping moment, it seemed like they might implode spectacularly. But the ship held firm. The plan was working. Sanctum Nexus's defenses short-circuited, a cascade of failures that rendered the prison vulnerable and the gods' attention momentarily distracted. The comms crackled to life, panicked voices overlapping in a cacophony of chaos. What the hell is happening? Someone screamed, a sentiment that was shared by many in that moment. Ree glanced out the viewport, watching as the prison systems failed spectacularly, a fireworks display that was both thrilling and terrifying. Now's our chance, she said, nodding to Argos. With deft hands and a prayer the gods probably wouldn't hear, Argos navigated them away from the chaos, the ship's engines roaring defiantly against the odds. As they fled into the unknown, a sense of giddy disbelief settled over them, a realization that they'd managed to pull off the impossible. Think they'll come after us? Argos asked, breaking the silence that lingered like an unwelcome guest. Ree shrugged, a wry smile on her lips. Oh, I'm counting on it. But for now, we've got a head start and a universe full of places to hide. Jax leaned back, exhaustion etched into every line of his face but eyes gleaming with triumph. Anyone up for a victory drink? I've got something stashed away, assuming it didn't get vaporized in the excitement. Considering our current luck, it's probably turned to dust, Ree replied, though she couldn't suppress the grin that tugged at her mouth. Cheers to surviving another day, Argos said, raising an imaginary glass. What more can a bunch of misfit convicts ask for? As laughter rippled through the group, the tension began to ease, replaced by a camaraderie born of shared madness and desperate hope. The universe was still out there, vast and uncaring, but for the first time, it felt like they might just have a fighting chance. And maybe, just maybe, they could make the gods regret ever trying to break them. The ship cruised on, a small speck in the endless night, carrying its cargo of defiance and dreams. For now, that was enough. Tomorrow could bring whatever it liked. Today, they had one. The flicker of stars through the viewport was hypnotic, each one a distant possibility. Ree leaned back in her seat, feeling the weight of hope's fragile burden. So, where to next? She asked, knowing the answer was as uncertain as the stars. Anywhere, Argos chimed in, settling in beside her. As long as it's far from any place that starts with Sanctum or ends with Nexus. Jax chuckled, a sound that echoed with relief and something like joy. Never thought I'd say this, but here's to running from gods and living to tell the tale. The ship sailed on through the void, a testament to human stubbornness and the refusal to bow. In the end, that might be all they needed. Let's see how long we can ride this wave before it crashes, Ree said, her eyes fixed on the horizonless expanse. With a shared look of determination, they faced the future with the same irreverent hope that had brought them this far. Because in a universe of uncertainties, sometimes all you had was the promise of tomorrow and the laughter of those who dared to defy it. The universe, as they say, has a sense of humor. A dark, twisted, and altogether unpleasant sense of humor, but humor nevertheless. One minute, they were floating through the void with the reckless abandon of a kid who just discovered fireworks, and the next, it was as if the gods decided to rain on their parade, literally. The endless darkness outside their viewport shimmered as if the fabric of space itself was twitching in annoyance. Re-watched as the blackness peeled back to reveal the unmistakable outline of alien ships, advancing like sharks in a kiddie pool. "Well, isn't that just peachy?" she muttered, her voice laced with a thick layer of sarcasm that could cut through steel. Argos leaned over her shoulder, peering at the unwelcome arrivals with all the enthusiasm of a man witnessing his taxes being audited. "Looks like our friends upstairs have decided to join the party. Shame we didn't send out invites." "More like gatecrashers," Jax said, eyeing the ships with a mix of awe and annoyance. "They always were the kind of guests who show up just after you've mopped the floors." In the blink of an eye, the alien armada began their assault on Sanctum Nexus. The prison, already a precarious blend of peace and pandemonium, now teetered on the brink of collapse. Alien projectiles rained down, and the prisoners found themselves in the crossfire, the prison walls shaking like they were made of cardboard and bad intentions. Warden Thalix stood at the threshold of panic and indifference, his scowl deepening to a level that might have been comical if not for the current situation. He bellowed orders into the chaos, his voice a gravelly bark that demanded respect and compliance, even if only out of habit. "Get those shields up, damn it. I don't care if you have to hold them in place with your teeth." But it was all for naught. The defenses of Sanctum Nexus, already weakened by Jax's ingenious sabotage, crumbled under the relentless alien barrage. It was like watching someone try to patch a sinking ship with duct tape and a prayer. Ree glared at the screens as they flickered with static, a perfect metaphor for their current state of affairs. "This is bad," she said, as if stating the obvious would somehow make it less true. Argos gave a dry chuckle, a sound devoid of actual humor. "Bad, this is catastrophic. We're a bunch of rabbits in a snare, just waiting for the hunter to come along and skin us." "Not if we have anything to say about it," Jax interjected, his fingers dancing over the ship's controls with the desperate grace of someone who knows they are out of options. "We just need a plan. A really, really good plan." "I think we used up all our good plans breaking out of that prison," Ree replied, her gaze fixed on the encroaching fleet. "And now it seems someone's trying to put a stop to our victory tour." As if on cue, the ship's alarms blared, a cacophony of shrill warnings that only added to the mounting pressure. "Hull integrity compromised," the system droned in a voice so annoyingly calm that Ree wanted to punch it. "Structural failure imminent." "Great, just great," Argos said, throwing his hands up in resignation. "We escape from one death trap only to fly straight into another. It's like the universe is running low on creativity. But it's certainly not running low on trying to kill us," Ree muttered. "Okay, folks, let's get creative. No one dies on my watch. Not today." Jax nodded, a look of fierce determination mingling with the exhaustion on his face. "I might have something that could buy us a little time." "Well, don't keep us in suspense," Ree snapped, her patience fraying by the minute. "Do you have a miracle tucked away in that toolbox of yours?" "Think of it more as a Hail Mary," Jax replied, his eyes scanning the console as if searching for divine intervention. "I can reroute power from the auxiliary systems to boost our shields. It won't hold for long, but it might give those aliens something to chew on." A tremor rocked the ship, underscoring the urgency of their situation. Ree nodded. "Do it. Argos, get ready to hit the thrusters. We're going to have to fly like we've never flown before." "Always wanted to test my skills under pressure," Argos quipped, his fingers hovering over the controls. "Let's just hope we don't test them straight into the afterlife." Jax worked quickly, his hands a blur as he manipulated the ship systems with the finesse of a magician performing his final act. The lights flickered, a visual reminder of their precarious situation, but then the shields flared to life, a soft hum of energy that wrapped them in a protective cocoon. "Shields are up," Jax announced, triumph coloring his voice. "Now let's get the hell out of here before they realize we're still breathing." Ree grinned, a fierce, almost defiant expression. "Argos, take us out of here. Let's see if we can leave them with a bit of interstellar dust to choke on." With a flick of his wrists, Argos engaged the thrusters, and the ship lurched forward, breaking away from the grip of Sanctum Nexus. Behind them, the alien fleet swarmed, relentless predators in pursuit of their prey. "This reminds me of that time we tried to rob the governor's treasury," Argos said, his voice steady but tinged with nostalgia. "Except this time the guards are a lot uglier. Focus on flying, not reminiscing," Ree shot back, though her eyes held a spark of amusement. "We'll have time for stories if we live to tell them." Jax kept his gaze glued to the monitors, every muscle taut with concentration. "All right, we've bought ourselves a bit of breathing room, but it's not going to last. We need a plan to lose them." Ree considered their options, a process that took all of 2 seconds before settling on the least suicidal of the lot. "We head for the asteroid belt. It's close enough that we can reach it before they can recalibrate their sensors. Once we're in, we can lose them in the debris." "An asteroid belt," Argos echoed, skepticism lacing his tone. "Are you sure about this? That's like hiding from a lion by jumping into a pit of snakes. Got any better ideas?" Ree countered, her gaze challenging. When Argos shook his head, she nodded. "Then it's settled. Asteroid belt it is." With renewed determination, they hurtled toward the belt, a dense field of cosmic debris that promised danger and opportunity in equal measure. Behind them, the alien ships closed in, a relentless force that seemed intent on punishing them for their audacity. As they approached the swirling mass of rock and metal, Ree felt a strange sense of calm settle over her. This was it, their final gambit. A chance to outwit their pursuers and carve out a future on their own terms. "Jax, keep those shields stable," she ordered, her voice a mix of authority and encouragement. "Argos, thread us through that mess like you're weaving a tapestry of destruction." "Now you're just mixing metaphors," Argos replied, but his smile was genuine, a testament to the bond forged in the fires of anarchy and chaos. The ship dipped and weaved through the asteroid belt, dodging massive rocks that loomed like sentinels in the dark. Argos guided them with an uncanny precision, a skill honed from years of navigating the unpredictable terrain of a galaxy that seemed hell-bent on their demise. Behind them, the alien ships struggled to follow, their larger, less nimble forms ill-suited to the chaotic dance of the belt. It was a small victory, but in times like these, even the smallest triumph felt monumental. "Looks like we've got a bit of a lead," Jax observed, his eyes flicking between the monitors and the view outside. "But we can't keep this up forever. Those shields won't hold against a direct hit." Ree nodded, acknowledging the truth in his words. "Then we make every second count. We get through this belt and find somewhere to hide, somewhere they can't follow." As they pushed deeper into the belt, the tension in the cabin was palpable, each passing moment a testament to their resolve. The alien ships continued their pursuit, determined to close the gap and end their defiance once and for all, but Ree refused to give in. With each twist and turn, each near miss and narrow escape, she held fast to the belief that they could emerge from this trial stronger, unbroken, and ready to defy the gods themselves. "Keep it together, everyone," she called out, her voice steady despite the chaos. "We're not done yet." In the heart of the asteroid belt, as the alien ships closed in and the odds seemed insurmountable, the crew of the HMS Dysfunction found strength in one another, in the shared defiance that bound them together. And together, they'd face whatever came next. Because in this universe, nothing was certain except the promise of adversity, and their unyielding spirit to overcome it. "Well, you know what they say about luck," Jax muttered, as he fumbled with the subspace tech. "It's either an illusion, or it's the kind of bad joke the universe plays when it's bored." Ree watched him with a mixture of skepticism and faint hope, the eternal optimist's grim cousin. "And what exactly is your plan?" "To make it explode in their faces." Jax grinned, his fingers dancing over the controls with the reckless enthusiasm of a gambler who's got nothing left to lose. "Pretty much. I figure if this thing can blow a hole through the fabric of space, it might just be enough to turn their day from mildly annoying to absolutely terrible." "Ah, weaponized desperation," Ree said, crossing her arms. "My favorite kind of plan." The HMS Dysfunction shuddered again as an alien missile grazed its hull, a gentle reminder that their time was running out faster than a cheetah on a caffeine binge. Argos was busy trying to outmaneuver the relentless barrage, which was akin to dodging raindrops in a monsoon. "How's it looking back there?" Argos called over his shoulder, not daring to take his eyes off the asteroid spinning past on the screen. "Are we about to become cosmic toast, or do we have a fighting chance?" "Define chance," Jax replied, his focus unwavering as he tweaked the settings on the subspace tech. "Because if you're asking if we're going to stroll back home with a victory parade, I've got bad news." Ree snickered. "Don't worry, Argos. We'll make sure your obituary mentions your dazzling flight skills." "You two are hilarious," Argos shot back, his voice strained. "Now can you make sure we don't end up as space dust?" "Working on it," Jax said, eyes flicking to Ree. "I need you to keep an eye on the power levels. If they spike too high, we're going to turn this ship into a very expensive firework." Ree nodded, her fingers hovering over the console. "Got it. I'll make sure we only partially incinerate ourselves." "That's the spirit," Jax said with a chuckle, flipping the final switch with a flourish. "Okay, here goes nothing." The ship's systems let out a groan, akin to an old man being forced out of bed on a Monday morning. The subspace weapon activated with a whir, the onboard lights dimming as it sucked up every available scrap of power like a starved vacuum. Outside, the alien ships paused, probably wondering if the humans had finally thrown in the towel. "Here comes the boom," Jax announced, bracing himself. The weapon fired, an invisible ripple cascading through the void, bending space and time with all the subtlety of a sledgehammer. For a moment, it seemed like the aliens might finally taste defeat, or at least a nasty case of indigestion. But then, as if on cue, everything went spectacularly wrong. The ship shuddered violently, and alarms blared with renewed vigor. Guys," Argos said, trying to keep the panic out of his voice. "I think we broke something, and I don't mean their faces." Ree's hands flew over the controls, trying to stabilize the rapidly deteriorating situation. "Looks like the universe isn't done playing its cosmic prank on us just yet." Jack squinted at the readouts, his expression darkening. "It's backfiring. The subspace tech is causing a feedback loop. We're about to rip ourselves a new one." "Well, that's one way to go out with a bang," Argos said dryly as the ship veered dangerously close to an asteroid. "Stand by," Ree barked, her tone brokering no argument. "Jax, can you reroute the power again? Anything to stop this ship from turning into a black hole wannabe." Jax's fingers flew across the console, desperation lending speed to his actions. "I'll try, but no promises. If the ship decides to implode, I'm claiming ignorance." Ree glanced at him, a wry smile tugging at her lips. "I think ignorance is our default setting right now." The ship's systems beeped in protest, but Jax managed to divert enough power to ease the worst of the feedback. The lights flickered back to life, and the shuddering subsided to a mild tremor, like a giant beast settling into an uneasy sleep. "Well, that was anticlimactic," Argos observed, his voice tinged with relief. "Still alive." "Define alive," Ree said, mimicking Jax's earlier sarcasm. Jax let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. "We're not dead, but we're also not out of the woods yet. They're still out there, and they're probably pissed." "Great, angry aliens," Argos muttered. "Just what I needed today." Ree looked at the monitors, noting the alien fleet regrouping. They're just not getting the hint, are they? A sudden realization hit Jax, a light bulb moment if ever there was one. Wait a minute, he said, eyes widening as he reviewed the data from the failed weapon attempt. There's something. There's a pattern in their power signature. Ree arched an eyebrow. Care to share with the class, genius? Jax tapped the console, his mind racing. The god's power. It's not as infallible as we thought. There's a fluctuation like a rhythm. If we can time it right, we might be able to exploit it. Argos glanced back, interest piqued. So you're saying there's a crack in their armor? A chink in the cosmic chainmail. Exactly, Jax said, excitement bleeding through his words. If we can synchronize our systems to that pattern, we might stand a chance at turning their power against them. Ree nodded, her mind already working through the logistics. How do we do that without blowing ourselves to smithereens? Carefully, Jax replied, flashing a grin. With a bit of luck, we might just pull this off. Luck, Argos scoffed. More like sheer stubbornness. Call it what you want, Ree said, a spark of hope in her eyes. But if there's a way to fight back, I'm all in. They got to work, Jax guiding them through the recalibration process with all the precision of a surgeon performing open-heart surgery during an earthquake. Argos kept one eye on the maneuvers, the other on the approaching alien ships, which were closing in like vultures sensing an easy meal. Jax, how much longer? Ree asked, her patience thinner than the ship's hull. Jax didn't look up from his work. Almost there. Just need to sync the output with their energy fluctuations. If we hit them at the right moment. Then what? Argos prompted, his voice a mix of skepticism and hope. Jax smiled, the grin of a gambler who sees the winning hand within reach. Then we give them a taste of their own medicine. Ree cracked her knuckles, a gesture of determination. All right then. Let's see if we can give these gods a lesson in humility. The ship systems hummed with renewed energy, the recalibration complete. Outside, the alien fleet prepared for another assault, unaware of the humans' newfound weapon. Ready when you are, Jax said, his voice steady. Ree took a deep breath, her resolve unshakable. Let's do this. Argos maneuvered the HMS Dysfunction with skill, the ship darting through the asteroid field like a rogue comet. As the alien ships bore down, Ree gave the command. Fire! The subspace weapon activated once more, its energy synced perfectly with the alien power signature. The ripple that followed wasn't just a random burst. It was a calculated strike, hitting the aliens at their weakest point. The result was spectacular. The alien ships faltered, their shields flickering and failing as the human strike found its mark. One by one, they began to peel away, retreating from the unexpected onslaught. Well, look at that, Argos crowed, his voice jubilant. We actually scared them off. Don't count your chickens before they hatch, Jax warned, though his smile betrayed his pride. We've bought ourselves some time, but this isn't over. Ree nodded, her heart pounding with the thrill of victory. No, it's not over, but it's a start. As the alien fleet retreated and the HMS Dysfunction soared to safety, a new determination settled among them. They had found a crack in the gods' armor, a chance to fight back and reclaim their freedom. The universe might still have its dark sense of humor, but for once, the joke was on the gods. And Ree, Jax, and Argos were just getting started. The HMS Dysfunction floated in a rare moment of tranquility, like a cat that had just finished a chaotic 10-minute sprint and was now pretending it had never been running like a lunatic at all. Inside, the crew was riding the adrenaline high of their miraculous success against the alien armada, but the impending silence was a stern reminder that celebrations might be a tad premature. All right, team, Ree began, her voice echoing through the cramped confines of the ship. We gave the gods a black eye, but let's not start patting ourselves on the back just yet. We're still a mouse in a very big, very angry cat's playground. I don't know about you, Jax said, leaning back in his chair with a satisfied grin, but I'm rather fond of not dying today. Argos rolled his eyes, still at the helm, fingers flicking switches with a practiced ease that said he was more comfortable piloting a flying disaster than he was at a dinner party. "Keep it up, Jax," he snorted. "We'll make a philosopher out of you yet," ignoring the banter, refocused on the bigger picture, or what little of it their tiny ship's battered sensors could capture. The alien fleet might have retreated, but if there was one thing gods didn't like, it was looking silly. No doubt, they'd regroup and return with a vengeance. "Jax, any chance you can turn that weapon of yours into something a bit more reliable than a one-hit wonder?" Ree asked, crossing her arms. He tapped a finger against his chin, pretending to think deeply. "Well, if I had a little more duct tape and a lot less cosmic interference, maybe we could string together another miracle duct tape," Argos quipped. "I thought you were planning to use the power of positive thinking." "Positive thinking." Jax chuckled, shaking his head. "If that worked, we'd have won this war with a smile and a motivational poster by now." Ree snorted at the thought. A whole universe held together by inspirational quotes. "Okay, here's the deal. We've got a window of opportunity here. We know their power fluctuates, and if we can time our attacks right, we might just be able to tip the cosmic scales in our favor." "Right," Argos said, nodding along like a bobblehead with slightly more sentience. "So, what's the plan, boss?" "We synchronize a series of attacks," Ree explained, gesturing at the chaotic array of data that flickered on the display before them. "If we can disrupt their link to whatever cosmic battery they're plugged into, we might just send them packing for good." Jax raised an eyebrow. "And how exactly do we do that without tearing a hole in the space-time continuum and getting sucked into a black void of nothingness?" "With style," Ree replied with a wink. "Style," Argos echoed dryly. "That's encouraging. I've got a few ideas," Jax said, already diving back into the ship's control systems, fingers a blur. "But be warned, they are about as stable as a politician's promises." "Good enough for me," Ree replied. "Let's show those so-called gods that humans are more than just comic relief in their little cosmic drama." As Jax worked, Argos kept the ship moving, a constant dance to stay one step ahead of any lingering alien entities that might decide to test their luck again. Ree coordinated with the Sanctum Nexus, sharing what they'd learned and preparing for the next phase of their impromptu rebellion. "Sanctum Nexus reports they're ready to synchronize on our signal," Ree announced, her fingers deftly navigating the communications console. "It's time we give these gods a taste of their own medicine." Argos leaned back, glancing over his shoulder. "And if we fail, it's back to square one, or worse, square zero." Optimistic as always, Jax commented, not looking up from his makeshift modifications. "But that's why we love you." "Love might be a strong word," Argos replied, smirking. "More like tolerate at best." "All right, everyone," Ree said, cutting through the banter with a commanding tone. "This is it. We're all in, and I don't want to hear any second thoughts or complaints. Let's knock some divinity down a peg." "Ready when you are," Jax chimed in, giving a thumbs-up that was both reassuring and slightly concerning given his track record with technology. "Let's dance," Argos added, settling into his seat as the ship's engines roared to life. The HMS Dysfunction powered up, systems humming with an almost eager anticipation. Across the void, Sanctum Nexus and the scattered fleet of human-resistant ships prepared to engage in what could either be a legendary victory or a spectacular failure. "On my mark," Ree announced, her voice steady as a rock. 3, 2, 1. Mark. With pinpoint precision, the humans unleashed their synchronized attack. A cascade of energy rippled through space, the subspace tech calibrated to the alien power fluctuations with surgical precision. The effect was immediate and glorious, like watching a bully get a well-deserved punch in the nose. The alien fleet shuddered as their power faltered, the gods' influence waning, their cosmic umbilical cord fraying under the strain. The human assault was relentless, exploiting every weakness with the cold efficiency of a well-oiled machine desperate to prove its worth. "Look at them run!" Argos shouted, exhilaration in his voice as the alien ships broke formation, the arrogance of immortality crumbling before human tenacity. "We're actually doing this," Jax breathed, his expression a mix of disbelief and elation. "We're putting the gods in their place." Ree nodded, satisfaction curling her lips into a smile. "About time, don't you think?" As the alien fleet retreated, the prison of Sanctum Nexus began to come alive with a new energy, hope. The human prisoners, long subdued under the gods' heel, sensed the shift in power, a spiritual awakening spreading like wildfire among them. The gods' once ironclad control fractured, the prisoners finding a new strength in the defiance blazing across the stars. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, the notion of freedom wasn't just a cruel joke, it was a tangible possibility. "Reports are coming in," Ree said, her eyes scanning the data flood. "The gods' hold is breaking. The prison systems are failing, people are waking up, fighting back. Looks like we've got a revolution on our hands," Jax noted with a satisfied nod. "Let's hope it's the good kind," Argos added, maneuvering the ship through the debris of defeated alien vessels. "You know, the kind that doesn't end with everyone dead." Ree watched the chaos unfold, feeling a strange mix of pride and trepidation. They'd turned the tide, but the battle was far from over. There were challenges ahead, new threats lurking just beyond the horizon of their hard-won victory. But for now, they'd scored a win against the gods themselves, and that was a victory worth savoring. "Here's to freedom," Ree said, raising an imaginary toast to their triumph. "To freedom," Jax and Argos echoed, voices united in the shared camaraderie of survivors who'd managed to beat the odds, at least for now. The universe might still have a dark sense of humor, but today, the punchline belonged to the humans. And it was a joke nobody, not even the gods, saw coming. The HMS Dysfunction sailed on, a beacon of defiance in a universe that loved to mock it. But as they looked forward to the battles yet to come, one thing was clear. The gods were on notice, and humanity was just getting started. And if the gods thought they'd seen everything, they were about to learn just how unpredictable humans could be. Sanctum Nexus had never been a place known for its hospitality, unless you counted the kind of hospitality that involved forced labor and a side of cosmic existential crises. But now, with the gods' iron grip weakened, the whole place had taken on the atmosphere of a schoolyard at recess, if all the kids were armed and had a bone to pick with the teachers. Warden Thalix stood in the control room, a man more comfortable with his coffee mug than the chaos unfolding around him. The mug now sat forgotten, its contents cold and unappealing amidst the brewing madness of newfound liberty. He scratched his chin, eyes scanning the monitors that flickered with scenes of prisoners, deciding if breaking a few more rules was a good idea or a spectacularly bad one. "Well, Thalix," he muttered to himself, "looks like freedom isn't just a marketing slogan anymore." He had never really believed in that slogan, mostly because it was his job to enforce the opposite. But here they were, the universe tossing its latest cosmic joke right into his lap, and he was the one who had to deal with the punchline. The doors to the control room hissed open, admitting Ree, her stride as purposeful as her gaze. She had that look, one part inspiration, two parts trouble with a generous sprinkle of "I told you so." "Looks like we've kicked the gods down a peg," Ree announced as if this was just another day at the office. Thalix grunted in response. "Good for us. Now what? We throw a parade, bake a cake. Offer everyone a ribbon for participation," Ree chuckled. "I was thinking more along the lines of building something new, a society that doesn't rely on divine oppression and substandard coffee." Thalix raised an eyebrow. "Ambitious, and what about the prisoners? They're not exactly the most cohesive bunch," she shrugged. "Cohesion's overrated. We'll settle for not killing each other for a start." Jax sauntered in, hands stuffed into his pockets, a grin plastered on his face that suggested he'd already figured out how to turn this chaos to his advantage. "I hear we're starting a revolution. I've always wanted to be a founding father, or at least a founding uncle. If only to save us from your terrible jokes," Thalix retorted. "How's the morale out there?" Jax shrugged. "Mixed. Some are thrilled to be free. Others are trying to figure out how to run the place like a functioning society. It's like watching toddlers try to build a spaceship. They're going to break things before they figure it out." "We need to knock some sense into them," Ree said. "Or at least some basic rules." Thalix crossed his arms. "You think you can wrangle these people?" "They're not exactly the cooperative type." "Not yet," she admitted. "But they will be. They just need a reason." Argos leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, the very picture of skepticism. "And what reason do you have in mind? Because do what I say or else went out of style with the gods." "We offer them a future," Ree replied, her tone confident. "A real shot at something better. We've proven it's possible to stand up to the gods. Now we show them what humanity can achieve on its own terms." "A sales pitch for the ages," Argos remarked dryly. "What about the logistics? Food, shelter, air that doesn't make you gag," Thalix sighed. "Been making do with scraps from the gods' table so long we might have forgotten how to cook for ourselves." "Then we learn," Ree asserted. "We rebuild, redistribute, re-something. I don't know, I'm not a politician." Jax chuckled. "Good, because I'd hate for you to start lying to us." "So what do we do first?" Argos asked, ever practical. Ree turned to Thalix. "We need to secure resources. The gods were hoarding everything they could get their hands on. We free up those supplies and we've got to start." "I'll see what I can do," Thalix agreed. "But I make no promises. These people are more likely to stab you than say thank you at this point." "Just keep them from stabbing each other long enough to listen," Ree said. "And I'll handle the rest." As the conversation wound down, a sense of purpose permeated the room, an unfamiliar but not unwelcome feeling. They had taken the first step, and now it was time to keep walking, even if nobody quite knew where the path led. Outside, the chaos continued, but it was a chaos tinged with hope and possibility. The prisoners, long shackled by divine decree, were beginning to see beyond the bars of their own making. Ree watched the scenes unfold on the monitors, a slight smile tugging at her lips. "Looks like they're getting the hang of it, more like they're getting a hangover from the euphoria," Argos quipped. "Let's hope they don't wake up with regrets, or a knife in the back," Jax added. "Call me optimistic," Ree said. "But I think they're going to surprise us." Thalix watched her, a weary skepticism in his eyes. "If there's one thing I've learned, it's that people are full of surprises. Good and bad, so we plan for both," Ree replied. "And hope we end up with more good than bad." As the day wore on, the groundwork for a new beginning was laid. The prisoners, inspired by their unlikely victory, began to organize. They elected leaders, those with the charisma and cunning to navigate the tumultuous waters of freedom. They scavenged supplies, pooled resources, and even managed to rig up a rudimentary power grid. "Look at them go," Jax marveled, watching the activity from a safe distance. "It's like a colony of ants that just discovered they don't have to take orders from the queen anymore." "Let's hope they don't start eating each other," Argos said, half joking. Ree stood with them, arms crossed, satisfaction in her eyes. "They are stronger than they know. We all are. Unity through adversity," Thalix mused, clearly torn between admiration and his natural cynicism. "Unity through kicking cosmic ass," Jax corrected, grinning. "That's my kind of unity." As night fell, the makeshift community settled into an uneasy truce, a fragile peace that was as much about exhaustion as it was about hope. Fires burned in the cleared spaces, casting flickering shadows across the faces of those gathered around them. The atmosphere was one of cautious optimism, the knowledge of what they'd achieved still sinking in. Thalix found himself at one of these fires, surrounded by prisoners who were more surprised than he was that they weren't trying to kill him. He sat in silence, nursing a cup of something that passed for tea, and listened to their stories. Tales of lives lost, dreams crushed, and the slow, grinding weight of oppression. For the first time in years, Thalix spoke without sarcasm. "We've got a chance here, a real chance. Let's not screw it up." One of the prisoners, a wiry man with a scar bisecting his face, looked at him and nodded. "We've traded chains for choices. That's something worth fighting for." As the fire crackled, the group lapsed into comfortable silence, the kind that grows between people who've all seen too much and lived to tell about it. Across the compound, Ree and her crew were doing the same, sitting, talking, planning. The stars above were no longer a cruel joke, but a reminder of what lay beyond. A future waiting to be shaped by those willing to grab it with both hands. "So what's next?" Jax asked, stretching out with a yawn. "Do we build a utopia, or maybe a theme park? I've always wanted to own a roller coaster. Let's start with survival," Ree suggested, her tone half serious. "Then we'll see about the theme park." Argos shook his head, a smirk on his lips. "Only we could turn revolution into a punchline. That's because we know the universe is always waiting for the next joke," Jax replied. "Might as well beat it to the punch." Ree felt a warmth spreading in her chest, a feeling she hadn't experienced in a long time: hope. It was a dangerous thing, hope. It could be dashed, crushed, used against you. But it could also be the spark that ignites a flame, the light in the darkness, the reason to keep fighting. "We've got a long way to go," she said, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "But we'll get there, one step at a time." And so, under the vast, indifferent sky, the seeds of a new society were sown. A society born from defiance, resilience, and the unyielding spirit of humanity. It wouldn't be easy. There would be setbacks, challenges, and days when everything seemed to fall apart. But they had a chance, a real fighting chance. And if there was one thing humans knew how to do, it was fight for what mattered. "To freedom," Ree whispered, raising her gaze to the stars. "To freedom," echoed the voices around her, a chorus of determination and grit. The universe might still have its dark sense of humor, but for now, humanity was in on the joke, and they were laughing all the way to the future together.